Hello, everyone, and welcome to Movie Goodness, where we examine life through cinema here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and welcome to the show, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this episode, and this is a special episode, even though I like to consider every episode that I do a special episode, but this is very, very special because today we are celebrating the 50th, yes, 50th year anniversary of the very first blockbuster. This is the first film to be considered a blockbuster that gave birth to all of the blockbusters that we have grown to love over the past 50 years. It all started on June the 20th, 1975, when Jaws hit movie theaters and took the world by storm. A lot of filmmakers who have came after this film were inspired by this film to become filmmakers. And we have gotten so much good content because of this movie. You know, unintentionally, intentionally, whatever the case may be, we got it because of this juggernaut of a film. And this is a movie that, strip it down to its bones, is a pretty simple movie. A shark. A man-eating shark goes on the attack at a beach. Okay, that's that. But what makes this movie so phenomenal? Well, we hopefully today we'll touch in on some things that, at least my reasoning why I think this is one of the most phenomenal, most important films in film history. Take away the fact that it was the biggest blockbuster of its time. I think it's the highest grossing movie, at least at the time of its release. It was the highest grossing movie ever, ever in movie history. Even though it didn't hold that title long, I think 2 years later, Star Wars came out and demolished that, but it held that title for the longest. Another thing that was spearheaded from this film was its director, Steven Spielberg. This is what birthed the greatest filmmaker of all time. It was Jaws. This wasn't his first film. He directed that movie Duel, and he directed Sugarland Express, and he did a couple of TV episodes of The Twilight Zone, I believe, and maybe another show. I don't know why I'm blanking on it right now, but this was the film that announced him to the world. After this, it was nothing. He went on just a roller coaster ride of success that is still 50 years later, still holding strong. Now, not every film that he made has knocked it out of the park, but he has knocked so many out of the park. After this, you have Raiders of the Lost Ark, all of the Indiana Jones films. You have Close Encounters of a Third Kind, E.T., The Color Purple, Jurassic Park, and so on and so forth. Saving Private Ryan and Minority Report, and of course Schindler's List, which finally got him his Academy Award in 1993, I believe. And aside from that, directing, he has been a phenomenal producer. He gave us the Goonies, he gave us the Back to the Future films, and so on and so forth. I'll be here forever naming all of the films and TV shows that Steven Spielberg has been associated with since Jaws hit the theaters and became this phenomenon and put his name on top of the marquee. But of course, none of this would have been possible without the source material, without the novel in which this film was based on, the 1974 novel of the same name written by Peter Benchley, which became a rousing success for a novel. It was, I think, for 44 weeks, what I read, that it was on top of the bestsellers list, and the paperback sold millions of copies, and that was before the movie came out. So when film producers Richard Zugnick and David Brown, they read the book, before it was published, they purchased the film rights for it. And so once the book came out and it was a huge success, they moved forward with a film adaptation, and they hired Steven Spielberg to direct the film, but he wasn't the first selection. There was a couple of other directors in contention before they quote unquote settled on a young Steven Spielberg, and the rest, as they say, is history. Of course, the film took liberties with the book. There are some elements of the novel that are not in the movie, but that's typical for any medium whenever you translate it over to film. We see that now in comic book movies. There's always changes. In any other format, there's always going to be changes. So they made changes, and we're going to touch in on a few of those changes as we get deeper into the episode. But from what I could research, and I'll probably find something later, or you'll probably know something, but as far as I know, Peter Benchley, the author of the book, didn't have a problem with some of the changes that they made. It was more of omissions instead of changes. It wasn't big changes like they moved the location from L.A. to Nantucket or something. No, it was nothing like that. It was just certain elements that were in the book they didn't include in the film. But in case you've been living under a rock for the last 50 years and have no earthly idea what Jaws is, Jaws is a thriller directed by Steven Spielberg. It stars Roy Scheider as a police chief named Malcolm Brody, who, with the help of a marine biologist played by Richard Dreyfuss and a professional shark hunter played by Robert Shaw, hunts a man-eating great white shark that attacks beachgoers at a summer resort town. In honor of the 50th anniversary of this film, we're going to go over 50 facts about this movie. And I know there have been many documentaries made about this movie because I've watched many of them. A lot of people know these backstories and how the filming took place, pre-production, production, and post-production. I know. But in honor of this milestone, we're going to go over 50 facts for the 50th anniversary of Jaws. And then we'll go into a little review of the 1975 film Jaws. So let's go through these 50 facts, starting with number one. Number one, the mechanical shark is named Bruce, and Steven Spielberg named the shark Bruce because that was his lawyer's name. So he wanted to I guess give homage to the one shark that he do know, and that's his lawyer, by naming the mechanical shark that they used Bruce. Number two, Jaws was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, but it only won 3: Best Sound, Best Score, and Best Editing. Number 3, the actress at the beginning of the film that was the first victim of the shark attack, she was harnessed to 2 ropes that drug her back and forth in the water to simulate the attack. That was real. She wasn't attacked by a shark, but she was literally drugged through the water on these harnesses. And I remember in one of the documentaries that I watched that she sustained some real injuries because of this, being violently pulled back and forth. I believe she was a stunt performer, but I mean, you can only train so hard to be yanked around, especially in water like that. It's not like you can brace yourself or anything. But yes, that's why that attack looks so brutal, because it was an actual brutal scene to film for, I believe her name is Susan Backlaney. She was just ravaged in that water, and she was nude. She was nude in that water, being yanked around like a worm on a hook, if you will. Number 4, there are 6 shark victims in the film, including a dog. So there were some casualties in this movie. Number 5, Steven Spielberg was only 28 when Jaws was released. He was a young man. He was a young buck back then. To think now that he's 78 years old, I'm like, oh my God, really? And he's still making a movie. I think he's filming a movie now with Emily Blunt and a few other people. I think it's an alien invasion movie, if I'm not mistaken, or something. I know it's has some sci-fi elements to it, but yes, he's still working today. But yes, he was a young pup back in 1974 when he shot this, but he was 28 years old. Number 6, Peter Benchley, the author of the novel, he actually played a TV reporter in one of the scenes in Jaws. Speaking of Peter Benchley, number 7, he originally was hired to write the screenplay, and Steven Spielberg publicly sniped at each other for months leading up to the release of the film. Yeah, they were at odds. They were at serious odds. I don't know what the reason is or was, but yeah, they did not necessarily get along. Number 8, Jaws was filmed mostly on Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Yeah, they shot on location. This was not in a soundstage. This was on location on Martha's Vineyard. Number 9, when I spoke about some of the changes or the omissions from the novel to the film, this was one of them. Number 9, in the original novel, the mafia put pressure on the mayor to keep the beaches open. In the film, it was, what was it, Memorial Day weekend or something like that, and that's why he wanted to keep it open, because of the tourism and whatnot. In the novel, it was the mafia, and I can see why they didn't include the mafia in the movie, because that kind of would have took away from, the story they were telling with Chief Brody and whatnot. But that would have been interesting to see nonetheless. Number 10, the composer John Williams, whose career had a huge boost from this movie. It was known as Johnny Williams back when he wrote scores for TV shows like Lost in Space. Yes, that's how long he's been working. That's how long John Williams has been putting in the work, people. He is one of, if not the greatest film composer of all time. Just think about the memorable scores that he has put to film, man, and that you still recognize to this day. I don't care what walk of life you on, what race, creed, whatever, or nationality, whatever. You know his themes. Jaws, the Superman theme. The Superman theme is so prevalent. What he wrote back in 1978 was so iconic that for this new Superman film that's coming out in a couple of weeks, they're still using that theme. There's no theme better. There is no greater theme than that. The Jurassic Park theme, the Star Wars theme, all of those great scores that came out of those films, and Indiana Jones, and so on and so forth. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on. The dude is just utterly amazing. Number 11, Carl Gottlieb, one of the writers of the screenplay, he plays a newspaper editor in the film. Number 12, Jaws opened simultaneously on more than 450 screens in North America. Now, that sounds low. That sounds like independent type thing that goes on in 2025, but not in 1975. That's not how movies rolled out. And that's why this has always been considered the first blockbuster. Movies didn't roll out that way. Either it'll come out, in sections, with 50 screens here, 100 screens here, and gradually build up to more and more screens. And this film, it was simultaneously across the country. they opened up around the same time, and that's what turned it into a phenomenon that it was. And that's how all films after this followed that model, and the birth of the blockbuster came to be. Number 13, Murray Hamilton, who played the mayor of Amity, was chosen partly for his resemblance to Richard Nixon. And so that's how he got the role, because he looked like Richard Nixon. Number 14, in 2001, Jaws was declared significant culturally and historically by the National Film Registry of the Library of Congress. My only question is why it took so long. Why did it take them till 2001 for it to be registered with the Library of Congress? This is one of the most significant films of all time. But hey, better late than never. Number 15, and sadly, there are 3 Jaws sequels. 3 sequels were spawned from this film that Steven Spielberg had nothing to do with, rightfully so. Those sequels were bad. They were what they were. I don't even remember part 2. I'm gonna be honest with you. I've seen it, but I don't remember it in its totality. I remember bits and pieces of it, but I do remember the third one because it was in 3D. I remember going with my brother to go see that in 3D in the theater. That's the one with Dennis Quaid and Louis Gossett Jr. I think is in that. It was when the shark attacked this water park, like this SeaWorld. It was not good. Anyway, and the less said about Jaws: The Revenge, the better. That has been arguably the worst, one of the worst films ever made on a lot of people's list, and for good reason. Number 16, Quinn's monologue about the USS Indianapolis, that supposedly was an uncredited contribution by screenwriter John Mildes. And if you know what who he is, he directed Conan, he directed Red Dawn. I think he co-wrote Scarface. I don't know why that's in my head. I could be 100% wrong. If I am, I apologize. But I want to say he did. But him and Oliver Stone. But I could be off on that. And the reason he contributed to this screenplay with this monologue, which is one of the greatest monologues in history. If you don't remember it, if you don't recall seeing this in Jaws, go back and watch for that. That was Robert Shaw delivering this monologue about the sharks that were going after the this battleship, and after it started sinking or whatever, and the people were going overboard, the soldiers were going overboard, and the sharks were attacking them and whatnot. This was based on facts, and John Mildes was there. It was based on a real incident. Well, I don't know if he was there, but it was based on a real incident that took place. So that's why it felt so real, is because it was. Number 17, the film was originally scheduled for a 55-day shoot, but due to the shark malfunctioning and all other problems that took place while filming, it took 159 days to film Jaws, basically quadrupling or tripling their shooting schedule for this film. Number 18, which would have been interesting had this actually happened. You know, I probably would have looked at this movie in a different way. But number 18, Charlton Heston lobbied hard for the role of Brody. He lobbied hard. The producers were on board. The studio was on board. Who wasn't on board? Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg wanted Roy Scheider for the role. And, you know, you can't argue that he was wrong, He did an excellent job, but it would have been interesting to see Charlton Heston, the great Charlton Heston, Moses himself, Ben-Hur, uh, be Chief Brody in this film. But hey, we'll never know how that would have turned out. Number 19, Jaws was based on an actual 1916 incident at the Jersey Shore. A rogue shark killed 4 beavers, 2 of them in an estuary, and there is a similar scene depicting that in the film. And so, yes, this was, I guess you can categorize Jaws as based on actual events or based on a true story, if you will. Number 20, in the original novel, Hopper, who is played by Richard Dreyfuss in the film, and Mrs. Brody had an affair. Another element that was not in the movie. And to be honest with you, it was a good omission from the film because I don't see where it would have moved the story along. Now, I never read the novel, so I don't know if the novel is quote unquote better, because a lot of people like to say, oh, the book was better. And it may be, but as far as this film, the way this film, the tone of this film, it wouldn't have fit. So it was a good omission not to include that affair in the film. Number 21, Scott Japlin's Ragtime is heard from a band shell during the beach panic scene. The Sting, which came out the year prior, or 2 years prior to the release of Jaws, and a monster hit. I think it won Best Picture, and it coincidentally starred Robert Shaw, who was in Jaws as well. It sparked the ragtag revival. So it's kind of a full circle thing to have that in this film. Number 22, the shock moment when Ben Garner's disfigured head pops up out of the boat was an 11-hour edition. That wasn't something that they was initially planning to do. After test screening, Steven Spielberg decided the movie needed one more big screen, and that's what he decided on, to shoot that scene where the head pops up, which worked. It worked. Number 23, besides Moby Dick, Jaws may owe something to the play An Enemy of the People, in which a doctor tries to warn the townspeople that their resort is contaminated. Number 24, at one point, the character of Harper yells out, I'm not going to stand this abuse much longer. This is actually a parody of Clark Gable in Mutiny on the Bounty. So that was kind of I guess you could say, paying homage to that film that was set at sea. Number 25, Universal Studios spent $1.8 million promoting Jaws, which in 1975 numbers was a lot of money. It's a lot of money now. You want to get technical, I could use 1.8 million. And so it will get me straight. But that was a lot of money in 1975. Number 26, Jaws was first shown on TV screens in one of the greatest years ever, 1979, the year I was born. And the first year, Jaws hit the television screens. Yes, people, we didn't get direct to digital back then. We didn't get piracy like that, back then. We had to wait. Man. And the fact you had to wait 4 years before that movie graced our television screens was it was the norm back then. But now, if you have to wait, you'll go crazy. Number 27, we're gonna need a bigger boat. The film's most famous catchphrase was not in the script. That was an improvised line by Roy Scheider. That line, which is probably one of the most quoted lines, honestly, in film history, along with "I'll be back" and "I am your father, Luke," and all this other stuff. Number 28, reduced beach going and increased shark sightings in 1975 were both a tribute to the film Jaws. You know, people were scared to go in the water. People did not want to get, and to this day, a lot of people do not go to the beach. At least they don't get in the water. They'll play in the sand, but they're not getting wet because of sharks, and rightfully so. I saw something on one of those social media. I want to say Facebook. A video. A woman was in the water, just standing on the shore, on the in the shadow part, and a lifeguard or somebody came by and yelled at her, "Get out the water, get out the water!" And she's like, "Why?" You know, and the camera pans over and you see the shark fin right there, just cruising along the little coastline, it's waiting. Yeah, yeah, rightfully so. It's number 29. Another change from the novel. In the novel, Hopper dies. As you saw, he survived in the book. I mean, in the film. Even though it was a little fake out, you thought he died, but he popped up at the end of the film. Number 30, Peter Benchley followed up this monster shark with a monster eel, the Deep, in 1976, and a monster squid, Beast, in 1991. I remember seeing a movie, Beast. I don't know. It must not have been all that because I vaguely remember. I think it was like a straight to DVD thing or something, or maybe it was straight to sci-fi or something. I cannot remember where I saw it at, but I think I only saw it once. The Deep, I want to say I saw something called The Deep too. I don't know if it was The Deep based on his novel or anything, but I do remember seeing one. But he caught fire with these sea monsters with Jaws, and he just, hey, it worked once, I'm gonna keep on chugging them along. Number 31, Quint's boat is the Orca. A Jaws movie ripoff was called The Orca, and it was about a killer whale, and that came out in 1977. I don't think I ever saw that. I gotta look that up. When I wrote this down, I'm like, man, there was a film called The Orca about a killer whale. I mean, they are killer whales. That's their name. So I mean, that wrote itself. But I gotta look that up and watch it. But yes, that particular film was a parody, if you will, of Jaws. Number 32, Jaws lost Best Picture at the Academy Awards that year to One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. And I can see that. That's rightfully so. I think that was justified. One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest is a classic. The Oscars got it right on that one, even though Jaws, they could have tied. If they were going to do a tie in any year, that would have been the year to do it. Number 33, movie rights for Jaws were purchased for about $175,000. Number 34, Lorraine Gary, who played Ellen Brody, she was the wife of Sid Steinberg, who at the time was the president of Universal Studios, which distributed the film. So a little nepotism there, if you will. Not nepotism, what's it called? But anyways, yeah, he got his wife the gig. But Lorraine Gary is a good actress. She really is. I can't see nobody else in that role, to be honest with you. So it all worked out. Number 35. Robert Shaw based his Quinn characteristics on Craig Kingsbury, a Martha's Vineyard fisherman who ironically played Ben Garner in the film, whose head pops up on the boat. And so he based his character on that guy in real life. So that was interesting. Number 36, the striking shot of Brody's reaction at the Beats attack was achieved by simultaneously zooming in and trucking out, a technique Spielberg borrowed from Alfred Hitchcock, the Great, that is, something that he did in Vertigo. And it became kind of his signature shot in films. I love that shot. In every film that he does that, I love that shot. It just brings a level of dread, and it's like I don't know. I guess it fits Vertigo. It gives you that Vertigo feel. It really puts you in the mind of the character. I love that shot. Number 37, Dick Richards, which is the greatest name on God on God's green earth. He an earlier director considered for the project was dropped by the producers of the film because he kept referring to the shark as the whale in story conferences. That's how he got fired, because he called the shark a whale. It, I mean, I've had a few jobs in my life, and I've lost a few jobs in my life, and never for verbiage. that is crazy to me. Number 38, the film had a legendary difficult shoot with many delays and problems. The crew took to call the film flaws, and many in the production really believed that the film was going to flop when it opened in theaters. Number 39, Steven Spielberg skipped the final day of shooting and was afraid disgruntled crewmen would throw him into the water. He thought that they had got into it so much on the set that at the last day they were going to try to kill him or something. He later made a tradition to be absent from the sets on the last day of the shoot. He does that for every film he has made after that. Number 40, Jaws cost $12 million to make and ultimately grossed $267 million in the United States alone. I would venture to say it was a success. Number 41, in the 2008 documentary about the making of Jaws called The Shark is Still Working, I've seen that one. A 2019 play about the making of Jaws written by Ian Shaw, who is the son of Robert Shaw and Joseph Nixon, is called The Shark is Broken, loosely based on that documentary. Number 42, Jaws has been rightly accused of creating shark phobia. It has also been rightly credited for creating more awareness of and concern for sharks. And I mean, you got to give to get. You can't make an omelet without breaking legs, but breaking eggs. This is, yeah, you created this fear, this phobia of people getting into the water, but at the same time, you're cautious. You're more cautious of these sharks that's out there. It still freaks me out. When we vacation, me and my family vacation to the beach, that's the only place my wife want to go is the beach. So it's always a concern of mine. I'm not gonna lie to you. Sharks are, they're killing machines, I feel. But when you read up on sharks or you watch these documentary films or shows about sharks don't like people. We taste bad to them. But I always live by the theory, how we taste bad unless you eat us first. And so I don't want to be spit out after chewed on for a little while, like, oh, you're disgusting. No, I'm disgusting, just leave me alone. Number 43, Richard Dreyfuss is the only one of the three principal actors, knock on wood, who are currently still alive. Roy Scheider, God rest his soul, and Robert Shaw, God rest his soul, passed away. But Richard Dreyfuss is still ticking. Actually, I saw him, and still working, because I saw him in something recently. So good on Richard Dreyfuss. Number 44, Amelie Island, the fictional location of Peter Benchley's book, appears to be modeled after Long Island. Most viewers of the film, which was shot on Martha's Vineyard, assumed it's somewhere in New England. Number 45, Peter Benchley had never set foot on Martha's Vineyard before filming began. Number 46, in the original screenplay, as we noted earlier, Hopper was supposed to die in the shark cage as it was in the book. However, footage of a live shark mauling an empty cage was so exciting that Spielberg wanted to incorporate it in the film. In order to explain the empty cage, they had to devise the twist where Hopper escaped and hid on the ocean floor. And so that's how that came to be, because Steven Spielberg thought it was more exciting to watch a shark attack an empty cage. That's why that character lived on, and it was changed from the book and from the screenplay, because apparently in the screenplay they followed it, and Steven Spielberg made the final change. Number 47, a scene of Quint laughing at the 1956 movie version of Moby Dick was nixed when Gregory Peck, who played Arab in that film, refused to grant permission. That's what killed it. I guess he felt like they were laughing at him, or the character was laughing or making fun of him in his performance or the film. But I think it was more of an homage, the word for today, because Jaws is ultimately Moby Dick. It's just another version of Moby Dick, just with a shark instead of a whale. But no, Gregory Peck said, nope, not going to use it. So that's why that scene was 86th from the film. Number 48, Jeff Bridges, John Voight, and Timothy Bottoms were all considered for the role of Hopper, before once again Steven Spielberg came with his decision with Richard Dreyfuss. Number 49, Show Me the Way to Go Home, the 1925 English music hall song that Brody, Hopper, and Quint sing in Drunken Fellowship, has also been quoted in dozens of books. Naked and the Dead, The Christmas Memory, and films as well. The River Runs Through It. In 1932, it was the centerpiece of the Bouncing Ball cartoon. And so that's why it probably rings a bell. At least that's how I remember it from the cartoons. I've never seen any or read those books or seen that film, but I do remember hearing that tune in a cartoon. And finally, number 50 of our 50 facts on the 50th anniversary. Peter Benchley thought the film's ending, where the shark was blown up by firing shots at that scuba tank, would strike audience as ridiculous. Steven Spielberg argued that the audience were suspended in so much disbelief by that point that they would accept it as well. And wouldn't you know it, he was right. And so those are your 50 facts for the 50th anniversary of Jaws. Now let's get into the review of this classic film, Jaws, from 1975, directed by Steven Spielberg, starring Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, and Richard Dreyfuss. This film is on a lot of people's top 10 lists, top 5, top 3, number 1 as their favorite film, greatest film of all time. I do enjoy Jaws. Unfortunately, I was one of the few or many, I don't know, because it seems like I'm one of the few that didn't really have a great appreciation for Jaws growing up, mainly because I didn't see Jaws until I think I watched the third one first. That was the first one I saw, was Jaws 3D. And then I saw Jaws. So it came later to me. And so I didn't have that same emotional attachment to Jaws as a lot of people did in 1975. Number one, I wasn't born in 1975. I didn't come along till 4 years later. And so I didn't get to see it in all of his glory, in all of his hype, and when it was at the peak of his box office glory. And so I didn't appreciate it until later in life. And honestly, I came to it because a lot of people were holding it in high regard. And I saw it, I was like, oh, it's fine. And you know, that's mainly because by the time that I did get around to watching Jaws, I've already seen Star Wars. I've already seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. I've already seen, Empire Strikes Back and stuff like that. I've seen multiple blockbuster films that were grander in stage, I guess you can say. But as I got older, I started to appreciate Jaws a little bit more for the filmmaking aspect of it. The story's the story. I stated earlier, it's a simple premise. you know, a resort town, a tourist town, uh, being attacked by a killer shark. Okay, you know, it's simple. It's simple. So when you have a simple format like that, you start paying attention more to the filmmaking. You start paying attention more to the acting, and how the story, how the film paces itself. And the older I got, became a teenager and watched it again, I was like, man, this is beautiful filmmaking, and especially when you start, at least when it came to me, I started hearing the production stories or the pre-production stories, and the hell that Steven Spielberg went through to make this movie, and the mere fact that he wanted the shark to be featured. It what makes Jaws so terrifying is the fact that you don't see the shark. You see the shark a couple of times, and that's mainly that grand entrance, I guess you could say, when Brody is tossing out the chum on side of the boat, and Jaws pops up out the water, and he backs up and said, "I think you're going to need a bigger boat." And that's the moment we first actually see the shark. But if it was up to Steven Spielberg, you would have saw the shark, the opening scene when it attacked that woman, and at night, he wanted to feature the shark a lot. It was nothing ambiguous about it. He wanted it to be up front and center. But due to the fact that the shark that they made, the mechanical shark, kept malfunctioning and couldn't get it right, and couldn't, they put it in the water, it'll sink to the bottom and stuff like that. It was a nightmare. And so Steven Spielberg had to go into his super creative ways to shoot around it. And it's a movie about Jaws. The movie is called Jaws. It's about a shark. And who wants to watch a movie that doesn't feature the shark? That's like watching Jurassic Park and you never see the dinosaurs in the movie. Ironically, Steven Spielberg film there. But, you want to see the shark. That's what you paid your money to see. And when I was younger, that's where my mindset was. I wanted to see the shark, but the horror of it all, letting your imagination do the work for you. That's why I appreciate movies like that now, is because of Jaws. This is when I really start diving into film and loving film and appreciating film and becoming a quasi cinephile, if you will, and looking at filmmaking and how it makes you feel, what emotions that are tapped in when you watch films. And Jaws did it for me. When I watched it, I was around 12 or 13 when I rewatched it again. It was on TV. Let me watch this again. Let me see. And especially around that time, because I had became the biggest Steven Spielberg fan, like millions of other people around the world. And I'm like, man, let me watch this again. Maybe I missed the boat, and no pun intended. And of course I did, because when I watched it when I was a preteen, teenager, whenever it was, when it finally clicked, I was like, man, this is beautiful. This is great. How everything was just constructed in this film, and to think that most of it was constructed on the fly. It wasn't meticulously planned out to a T here. They had to make a chicken salad out of what. So, and it worked beautifully. Growing up, after repeat viewings, I can see why this is a classic horror film, because it's a horror film. Don't get it mistaken for just a thriller. Yes, it's a thriller. It has thriller elements, but it also have horror elements as well, because this isn't a normal shark. This isn't your mom's your dad's shark here. This was a killing machine that we witnessed on the big screen, and how it invoked this fear of getting into the water. You know, this isn't a fictional character. This isn't a fictional monster. This, is not the Loch Ness monster that we're talking about here. It isn't a kraken. This is an actual thing that if on any given day, depending on where you live at, if you go out to your local beach front or lake front or whatever the case may be, you can very well see a shark fin, just casing the joint, just waiting on somebody to dip their toe into the water. So this is something that is actual and factual, that can happen to you. Now as far as the shark stalking you and whatnot, I don't know about that, but you suspend disbelief. It is a movie after all, but it does invoke that actual fear into you that a lot of people have taken to their graves and still living with 50 years later. As far as I'm concerned, it would most likely inspire people to develop a fascination for sharks. I mean, we get Shark Week every year on the Discovery Channel because of this. It's because of Jaws. Nobody was paying that much attention to Jaws, to sharks until that movie came along, and people started studying them and, trying to figure out what makes them tick. It's a shark after all. But it also depicts them as this mysterious animal. Nobody knows about sharks like that. It isn't like you can capture a shark and question it. It's not like you can capture a shark and study it in his mind. We saw that in Deep Blue Sea, which is another shark film that I actually enjoyed. It's a guilty pleasure film. Nowhere near the caliber of Jaws, but you can't study these animals, and that's what also makes them scary, because you don't know when, why, or how they're going to strike. You can swim with sharks and they won't bother you today, but you'll go dive in that same location and swim around, and all of a sudden they attack you. It's just like it's no rhyme or reason for sharks. But with all that being said, went on this rant about sharks. But the movie, I love the movie, how they made it mysterious, how they kept it under wraps. You knew it was a shark, you just couldn't see the shark. You saw enough. The scene when it attacks that boy, when it kills that little boy, and you don't see the shark, you don't even see the boy being ripped apart or anything like that, but you do see what's going on out there in the water. And that's the scene where you saw Chief Brody with that iconic pan in, zoom out shot or whatever. Beautiful shot. But yeah, the opening scene that we mentioned earlier, with that actress being flung around or dragged around the ocean on those wires, man. I mean, the brutality of what these sharks can do in this film, or what this shark can do in this film, is just frightening, man. It is super frightening, and it is a true horror film, all while exploring the characters that we were introduced, our three lead actors here. And that's another rarity that we don't see in film today. Three leads. You'll see two. You'll see a buddy cop film or something, but you're never, I can't recall seeing a 3-man troupe, with Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Scheider and Robert Shaw, who are all leads in their own right, but coming together to kind of share the lead in this film and have their moments of shine and get behind all three characters. Hopper is the one character I didn't like in this movie. I couldn't stand him. I couldn't stand the mayor, and I'm not saying as far as them being in the movie or the actors. I just mean as their characters. I couldn't stand the mayor, and I couldn't stand Hopper. I like Richard Dreyfuss, but the character of Hopper, and if they would have stuck to the character that as he is in the book, as I've researched on, I definitely wouldn't have liked him if they would have stayed true to him as he is in the book. But he was just this, I don't know, man. He was just pompous. I couldn't stand him. Could not stand that character. But unfortunately, well, God, let me take that back. Forgive me. Not unfortunately, he did survive. But the part I want to say, unfortunately, Quint didn't survive, which was, my God, the most brutal scene ever. Still to this day, 50 years later, that is the most disturbing death scene I have seen on screen, or one of. I've seen a lot of disturbing ones, but that one sticks with me to the point where I can't look at it. And I'm a grown man. I rewatched it the other day for this show, and I still can't look at it, man. It still traumatizes me how Quint died in this film. And it was like, man, did we have to see it all? The shark just chomping at him, man. Just like he's on a conveyor belt or something. It was so brutal. And it had to be honest with you, because if you really think about it, that character had to go out like that. he had to go out like that. But I love Robert Shaw's performance as Quint, to the bloody end. The satisfying ending to this film still is one of the best endings, most satisfying endings in movie history. I've been in a packed theater during Avengers Endgame at the very end, and the cheers and the crying and all the emotions that was spilling out at the end of that movie in that packed theater is something that I'll never forget. I've been in the theater for Spider-Man No Way Home, the packed theater, and when Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield popped up on screen, the reaction that happened in the theater was something special that I'll never forget. I wasn't in the theater in 1975. I wasn't anywhere in 1975, but I can just imagine the reaction for when Brody said, "Smile, you son of a bitch," and shot that tank in his mouth. It had to be the most epic moment. I know it's still, when I watched it the other day, it still sent chills up my spine. It was just so satisfying, to defeat that shark. Was it silly? Yeah. It was it believable? Not really. Of course it's silly. I agree with Peter Benchley. I understand why it looks crazy, because that is the most illogical thing that could ever happen. A shark don't jump out of water. At least I've never seen a shark come out of the water. It's not a dolphin. But in Steven Spielberg's defense, he did say that, look, at this point, if the people really to go on this ride with this, at this point, their level of belief is pretty much null and void. So it didn't matter, and it didn't, because it was a satisfying ending to this film. I love Jaws. Jaws, I can see why this is such an inspiration for hundreds, if not thousands, of filmmakers around the world, because this is a master class of filmmaking, because no film goes off without a hitch. There's always something that comes along that will disrupt production, and you don't have an actual smooth production because it's not a one-man show. It's hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, who put a film together. For us to sit down and watch a 90-minute to 2-hour long film or longer, you have to contribute that to so many people. It's not just the actors you see in front of the camera. It's not just the director. It's not just the writer. It's everybody that has to come together and make a film work. And for every film there's always going to be different personalities, different views, different visions, different opinions about certain things. So it makes it a little difficult. And when you have a film like Jaws, where virtually it was Murphy's Law, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So it was it was a hell shoot, but Steven Spielberg and his fellow crewmen and filmmakers there on the set found a way to make it work, and it still holds up in 2025. It is a true classic. It is the mother of all summer blockbusters. It is Jaws from 1975, and it gets a letter grade of an A plus. There is no flaws in Jaws. There's not a flaw in Jaws. It is truly a masterpiece of film, and it's crazy to say that. It feels funny to say that, knowing the backstory, knowing that it was far from a masterpiece. If it would have went according to plan, if it would have went just the way Steven Spielberg pictured it, it wouldn't be the classic that it is. And that's just the crazy part about it. It wouldn't have been this phenomenal of a movie. He accidentally, and that's not to take away from his genius, it's just the way it is. It actually, it contributes to his genius. The fact that he had to rework things, he had to shoot around things. He had to be innovative and use his imagination instead of relying on the mechanics and stuff. And we got a classic out of it. It's crazy to believe that this movie is 50 years old. It is crazy. Number one, it signifies that I'm old. Now, I'm not 50. I wasn't around when it was released, but I'm not too far from it. I'm not too far from it. It just let me know that 50 is right around the corner for me. There's that element, and it's also the fact that for 50 years, this movie still holds up. And that's the beauty of it. That's what makes a classic a classic. If you can watch it 10, 15, 20, and 50 years later, and it's still as good as it was when you first watched it, that's a classic. If it's still as good, if you still discover things, because there were things I discovered watching it the other day. This bad hat, that's one bad hat, Harry. I never heard that line, and I heard it spoken by somebody else. I believe it was Bryan Singer, because Bryan Singer, the director of X-Men and Bohemian Rhapsody and stuff like that, he named his production company Bad Hat Harry. And it was off of that line in Jaws, when Brody says that to the mayor, I believe. Oh no, not the mayor. I forgot the character's name. But anyway, I finally heard it when I rewatched it, and it was a good line. It was a funny line where it was placed in the film. I think it's the most slept on line, to be honest with you. Everybody always gravitates to you've got to get a bigger boat, but that's my favorite line from the movie. And I just discovered it the other day. It just goes to show you that this movie finds a way to stay alive after 50 glorious years. I would like to know, how did you first discover Jaws? Were you there in 1975? On June the 20th, 1975, did you go into the theater to watch this just classic horror thriller? Or or you like me, a little younger, and you had to wait till it came on television? Or you was blessed to get a VCR and went and bought the VHS and stuff like that? When did you first discover Jaws, and how do you rank it on your top? Is it one of your favorites? Is it all right? Is it one of Steven Spielberg's best, or whatever the case may be? Let me know. Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, YouTube, ladies and gentlemen. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the KB Radio Network channel, that is, and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to movie goodness here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we went back to 1975 to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the mother of all summer blockbusters, Jaws. I want you all to know that I love you, continue to love everyone, and until we speak again, you all be blessed.